So today's session, we'll try to complete Indo-Sri Lankan relation, and we'll start with Indo-Myanmar as well, right? So for tomorrow, we are going to finish Indo-Myanmar. Probably we are going to start with Indo-Bhutan, okay? So we have to catch ourselves bit ahead, but still it's okay. You can always ask me if you're not able to get anything. So just a quick revision for tomorrow, yesterday. The slide is not moving. ये स्लाइड क्यों नहीं चल रही? ओ ये ऊपर वाली कल तो पीडीएफ यहाँ से चल रही थी, आज ऊपर से चलेगी ऐसे? अच्छा ठीक है, ओके ठीक है मैडम, थैंक यू. Okay, so this already we know the context and all, right? Strategic importance is also fine. From here we can start again a brief review, because anyways we are going to deal with the human right violation issues and how that issue got internationalized. So what was the story behind? Just a very quick revision, that from 1983 to 2009 civil war had started in Sri Lanka, but the story lies in the history, somewhat in the prehistoric stage. I told you that the origin theory says that many of the Tamilians have migrated from the Chola administration in India and they went there, you know. So the thing is that there was this, not only we can say there was this incompatibility as far as the social or the cultural composition was concerned. Not only there was incompatibility in terms of religion, in terms of language they were speaking, but also there was going to be a major power dispute. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so not only there was this color is not good. Not only there was this, तो color ही नहीं है. Not only there was religious, you know, differences. Thoda this color is, this is not looking good, no? ये क्या समस्या है भाई? I don't know, I'll call them then. Okay, so there was this religious incompatibility, there was this linguistic compatibility also. And apart from that, there was this power dispute. Okay. So now what happened, that came the British rule, and during British rule, I told you there was this policy of Tamilian favoritism. So Britishers basically favored the Tamilian population at that time. So there was this Tamilian favoritism which was going on. And of course, Sinhalese dominated society felt quite neglected, okay? And this was quite a deliberate process by the time of Britishers, because this was something which they have always adopted in any country they went. Now, after post-independence, the entire story got reversed. The story got reversed in the sense that now here the Sinhalese dominated government came into power, and in a very systematic way they started disenfranchising the Tamilian minorities. So a slew of legislations were being passed. So there was this Sinhala Act which was being passed, which of course made Sinhala the official language. Then of course Buddhism was being made the state religion of Sri Lanka. After that, there was also this policy of standardization. This standardization policies, that was quite kind of, we can say, an attempt so that the Sinhalese could come up into the major government and official positions. So under the standardization process, the Tamilians were required to, get larger merit into the exams, any of the government exams. So for them, the cutoff list merit was quite high as compared to the Sinhalese. So anyways, Tamilians were very much against it, because all the government posts were also going to the Sinhalese, right? So in this way, in a very systematic way, government of Sri Lanka post-independence started this policy of segregating and isolating the Tamilians minority. Therein came this idea of a separate Tamil state, and that was called the Tamil Elam. That is a separate Tamil state. So the demand of a separate Tamil state came up. There were many groups. It was not that only LTTE was there. There were many groups, but LTTE, that is Liberation of Tiger Tamilians Elam, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam, they were the most prominent and the most powerful. Therefore, LTTE came into prominence, right? Okay, one more thing I told you, that actually the geographical sphere in which the Tamilians and the Sinhalese were residing, that was also very different. So it was this position where the Tamilians were residing, and in the rest of the positions, Sinhalese were residing. So the idea was then to formalize the existing geographical spheres within the country. So the idea was to formalize the geographical sphere or separation. You can call it separation. Geographical separation. And it was in this attempt that demand for a separate Tamil state started, right? Now, ethnic tension started growing up from year 1976, and LTTE was under leadership of V. Prabhakaran. Conflict, it was one of the longest running civil wars in South Asia. It took almost a decade, 3 decades to come up. And after the war got ended, the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, they started making an inquiry that what exactly is the status of human right. And they found that there are and have been instances of torture, murder, disappearance, which is called enforced disappearance, so these were certain things which the Human Rights Commission has come up. Murder, torture of war prisoners, of Tamilian people. So these kind of things when came up. Now, what is the situation? And the situation now and protest revisited. So I said that after this, Black Lives Matters revolt, when human rights and especially the racism issue was being, kept into the, came into limelight. After that, this issue of in Sri Lanka also got internationalized, right? So before that, before we go with the way forward, of course, could be just write a way forward, and then we'll look into the Indian intervention. So what could be the way forward as far as these kind of ethnic strifes are concerned? And I believe this way forward holds true for any country which is engulfed with these kind of ethnic strifes. So of course, a unified citizenry. Yes, please. A unified citizenry is the foremost thing which is essential for making the civil society peaceful. Unified citizenry means that citizens need to understand that even if they are diverse, they need to respect the difference. That is something which is very important. So you need to respect the difference. Manji. Abhi to I have not started only. No, that was just a, just an idea. In the coming slides, I'll be showing you the entire, that how many times in UNHRC this resolution has been passed, how many times India has voted in favor, how many times it has abstained, how many times the voting has been done without, resolution has been passed without any kind of voting. Then we will look into what was the implication of the recent absentation which India did, right? Then we will look into the analysis part, that was it a diplomatic fiasco from the side of Sri Lanka, that they were not able to align their traditional allies like India and Japan also within their own agreements, right? So these were the countries who, of course, didn't went against Sri Lanka, but of course they abstained from voting. Neither they went in favor. And as I told you, absentation was one signal of India's a kind of the warning which in a very strict terms India was giving to them, and also keeping into mind the debt trap diplomacy within which Sri Lanka has already fallen, and how India always was warning its traditional allies not to rely upon China. So all these things, of course, we will deal later on, right? So what is the unified citizenry? Unified citizenry means respect the differences in the society. Herein comes the concept of toleration. In Hindi, we call it Sahinshrunata. Toleration is very important, and toleration, the debate on toleration became very important, when one of the famous actors, they made this kind of statement that for some community, Indian society is not safe to stay. And after that time, this entire debate of toleration came up, that, and believe me, India is the only country where every people can stay safe, they can raise their voice, because everyone, each one of us are embodied with the spirit of toleration. This is a process of socialization through which every one of us has gone through. So, and because we have grown up like this only, in schools, in colleges, here also, we are grown up with this kind, that we doesn't feel a particular kind of alienation for some other cultural practices, right? So this thing is very important, respect the tolerance. So a unified citizenry is one of the fundamental solutions. And second could, of course, be ethnic unity. So you can go for ethnic differences and yet you can live in a very unified way. So these could be two important long-term measures. See, whenever some problem as far as society is concerned, be it any issue, be it communal issue, be it affirmative action issue, or any issues, right, regarding society, there has to be a two-pronged approach. One approach is the immediate, what immediately you can do, right? What immediately you can do. And another could be the long-lasting measures. The long-lasting measures are basically the measures which involve these kind of things, that how we and you should behave, how government should. Immediate measures generally deals with the immediate government interventions, right? So the immediate government intervention is what is happening. Like you involve 13th Amendment, that's what India is saying. I'll let you know what 13th Amendment is also. These are certain immediate measures which can be taken in order to make that crisis get resolved. But the long-term measures are this. And the long-term measures actually are more concerned with the civil society. Right? After all, civil society is the basis of any state foundation. We are not going into the details of what exactly is, because that you study in PSIR. But just understand this thing, that a very vibrant civil society, what is civil society? It's a cushion. It's a cushion which provides every individual to dissipate their feelings. And because of civil society, see, all those countries which have a very vibrant civil society history shows, have not witnessed any kind of such revolution. Only and only in those countries where civil society is not active, where you don't give space to civil society, we find instances of revolution, right? So the entire Arab Spring uprising, the entire Arab Spring, So that entire MENA region, the Middle East and the North African region in which this crisis happened, you take one of the state and tell me that was there a vibrant civil society? No. The very reason that, as I say, in India, despite of so many diversity, every time very graciously, very gracefully, we are passing the baton of power. There is no such instances of military coup, neither has been such glaring instances of human rights violation, is because we are bestowed with a very vibrant civil society, and we and you make this civil society more vibrant. So civil society has to be very vibrant, but that is going to be a long-term measure. Okay. So you can always end up your answer in this note. So what was Indian intervention? Indian intervention in Sri Lankan civil war, how it all started. You know, in Sri Lanka at that time, there was this process of Sinhalization. This was a deliberate attempt by the government at that time. Right? Now, what was this process of Sinhalization? This means that Sinhalese culture, the Sinhalese culture was slowly replacing that of, this means Sinhalese culture was slowly replacing that of Tamilian culture. So this was a very slow process, Sinhalization. Slowly and steadily, Sinhalese culture was replacing the Tamilian culture. How? Sinhalese monuments were being built. Through Sinhalese monuments, road signs, village, town names was being replaced by Sinhalese culture. How can you replace the Sinhalese Tamilian culture? You can replace it by naming major towns as far as in Sri Lanka is concerned in Sinhalese. So Sinhalese monuments were being created, road signs, village names, road signs, sign, S-I-G-N, sign, village name or town names were changed. Buddhist places of worship became more popular. You know? So this was a very systematic attempt by the then government at that time. So this was a process of Sinhalization, right? Okay, so therefore Tamilians got very much agitated. So India then had to intervene. In 1987, the Indian peacekeeping forces were being sent. This was in year 1987. So Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister of India at that time, and he decided to intervene. Now, important for us is the reason for intervention. Bole. Why not? At least in the northern and the northeastern part, where Tamilians were majority, they were having their Tamilian culture, but the Sinhalization process tried to replace that. So even in those regions, the roads, the villages, were town names, everything was being changed. No. After post-independence, the story got reversed, I told you, no? During Britishers, there was this policy of Tamilian favoritism which was happening. So Tamilians were at a higher position. After independence, since Sinhalese were in majority, therefore they came into power. And the moment they came into power, they started a systematic process of disenfranchising the Tamilian minorities. This is known as the process of singalization, wherein everything was being changed in terms of singhalese. Tamilians got very agitated. But what was the situation or the reason why India had to intervene? So, right, in 1987, Rajiv Gandhi, first write this heading, Indian intervention in Sri Lankan civil war. In 1987, Rajiv Gandhi decided to intervene in the situation, mainly because of two reasons. So the two reasons was, number one, separatism issue, which even reached to the Indian state of Tamil Nadu. Separatism was there in Sri Lanka. Tamilians wanted to separate. But the moment that movement reached to Tamil Nadu, Indian government got very cautious. Reason? Because Tamilian community were very much connected. Anyways, I told you, that is the reason I told you the history also, just in very brief, that it was these people from Chola, from Tamil Nadu only who have gone there. So they had a deep rooted, connection. Okay. Geographically also, they were very near. And culturally also they were very near. So this entire movement of Tamil separatism when started, Indian government got very cautious. Ki bhai, what if it comes into our own homeland? Right? This was the first reason. Second reason was to avoid the refugees. And it was information that huge amount of refugees are coming to Indian shores. So India had two very important challenges in front of them. Apart from this, as far as the international politics was concerned, there was always a fear in mind of India regarding a third actor. Third actor in vicinity. India never wanted a third actor to come in its vicinity. This third actor at that time could have been USA also. It could have been China also. Now, if we talk about agar abhi ki situation, if we see, then it might be China. But of course, this is not the situation at present. So at that time, India never wanted a third actor to come up, especially in the IOR, that is Indian Ocean region, right? So it was because of these reasons that Rajiv Gandhi decided to intervene. So in 1987, second point, Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord was signed. To be more precise, it was on 29 July. No need to remember the date, 1987. Haji. Why would you like the same issue? Why is Russia making this kind of aggressive posture towards Ukraine? Because it doesn't want a third actor near its vicinity. Simple logic. That is the reason Russia is coming forward with such kind of aggression. Because if Ukraine makes any kind of alignment towards NATO, right? Yeah. So entire NATO will be at its back. USA would be there near the border, you never know. And that Russia definitely doesn't want. So any power, any regional power doesn't want any other actor to be more active in its vicinity. India has always been one of the regional powers, especially in South Asia, and therefore, of course, they doesn't want it a third actor to come and intervene. So they thought that before this power vacuums attracts a third actor, let's get involved and try to mediate and solve. So Indian government intervened, keeping into mind the intelligence reports that this is going to be a big fiasco, and that turned out to be true as well, right? So Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord was signed on 29 July 1987, just remember 1987, between Rajiv Gandhi and Sri Lankan President Jayawardene. And what was the aim? Just write aim. Aim was peace accord. What was the aim of this accord? The aim of this accord was to resolve this issue, to resolve the issue by enabling 13th Amendment in Sri Lankan Constitution. So the aim was to resolve the Sri Lankan civil war by enabling 13th Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka and Provincial Council Act of 1987 to implement this. So India wanted to enable 13th Amendment in Constitution of Sri Lanka. I'll let you know what exactly is this 13th Amendment, and to include the Provincial Council Act of 1987. Now, under the terms of the agreement at that time, right, Colombo agreed to it. Now, what is this 13th Amendment? Basically, it talks about devolution of power. It talks about devolution of power. And you know, this 13th Amendment is still a bone of contention between India and Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka has still, especially with this recent government came into power, they have completely rejected any kind of plans to implement this 13th Amendment. However, government at that time had agreed. Okay, so Colombo agreed the devolution of power to the provinces, and it was also agreed that Sri Lankan forces would withdraw their troops, and it was also agreed that Tamilian rebels would surrender, right? Now, most important thing, you might wonder that if so many good things were happening within this accord, then what happened? The problem was that, you know, I told you LTTE was just one of the organizations of Tamilians. There were many other Tamilian organizations also. So in this talk, many other Tamilian organizations were included, but LTTE has not participated, right? So initially LTTE, which was not made party to the talks, initially it agreed to surrender the troops to the Indian peacekeeping forces. However, later on the issue of representation, let me just complete. On the issue of representation, this accord failed. They said, our voice, our views are not being taken. We are not going to be the part of it. Since we are not going to be the part of it, the third condition says that Tamilian militant have to surrender. We are not going to surrender. Now, please. No, the thing was, because I thought this is not something which I had to dictate, because this was something, I can slow down, but this was something which I thought it's just to make you understand that what all happened, because anyways, for mains, this exactly the thing might not come. However, in order to get a feel of the entire issue, you need to understand what happened. I'll again repeat it. Keep writing. So what I'm saying is, in 1987, this peace accord was being signed. Right? 3 important, ab likh nahi rahe ho. 3. I thought everyone, huh? If you wish, you can write, no? I believe you are not that, first year college student whom every time we have to tell, now start writing, now stop writing. Whatever you feel is relevant. See, all these things is not, mains preparation is not only for mains, it is also for your interview. Because you never know, that interviewer might not ask something, right? So therefore, the attempt should always be to get a holistic picture, even if that is not required exclusively for your mains preparation. Okay. So in 1987, what happened? That India and Sri Lanka signed this accord. 3 very important things were there under the agreement. Number 1, Colombo agreed, or Sri Lanka agreed, Colombo was the capital at that time, so Sri Lanka agreed for the devolution of power to the provinces. They said, okay, fine, we will devolve the power to the provinces. So devolution of power thing got a kind of consent from both the parties. Second, then Sri Lankan troops said, okay, fine, we are ready to withdraw. So they said, we are ready to withdraw. See, this answer I don't want to answer on record of the class. I'll tell you that. क्या ही बोले अब? Have you seen that movie Madras Cafe? Yeah. देखने की जरूरत नहीं है. No need to watch it if not seen it. नहीं. See, the thing is, frankly speaking, out of your national security reason, many times the intelligence agencies are involved into many activities which are not on book, on record, but everyone knows that they have been into it. Frankly speaking, LTTE earlier had, of course, got a kind of shelter, right? Of course, from, yeah. Okay. So that was something. See, a conflict-ridden neighbor is always beneficial for you in some other reasons as well. Because there, and if conflict is being little bit pushed by your side as well, because then you will come up for a rescuer. Okay, fine, I'll solve the conflict. Because you somehow know that where is that line wherein that conflict started. Times, not always. So, India, of course, always wanted to establish its hegemony, and in terms of international relation, there is no harm in saying that every nation has to put their national interest. All those who are arguing in favor of Russia, right? So from Russian side also, if you look into the Ukrainian crisis, minus the humanitarian crisis which has been created, if that thing is not taken into account, then of course what the stance of Russia is purely guided by national interest. And in international politics, as Morgenthau also says, right, he was a great realist thinker. For those who are not in PSIR, just listen. He was one of the foremost realist thinker. What Morgenthau says, he says conventional moralities do not find any place in international politics. Good, bad, evil, these things have different connotation for conventional society, for conventional behavior, and they have different connotation at international level. So if India feels that today at this point we need to support Israel because Israel is going to be our biggest defense supplier, and we are abandoning our old stance of supporting Palestine, right? So everyone should consider it to be a prudent act, because this is what India is doing for keeping up its national interest. Therefore, conventional moralities say you should never equate a nation's projection, right? Pardon? So, yeah, see, with changing environment and with changing equations, your stance in foreign policy would change. And if you are not changing, then as a nation, you are not doing something great. So change is very essential for IR. So what you said also, that was something which is not much discussed, at least not in a very, the services and all when you are writing about it. But of course, there were many angles which were involved as far as Indian intervention and India's motive was concerned, right? But we'll just go with something which is very conventional. So conventionally, India intervened because of these reasons, okay? So Tamilian, third condition was that Tamilian rebels said that we are agreeing to surrender. But as I said, that there was this problem of representation, wherein LTTE said that our voice was not being taken into account. Earlier, initially, LTTE agreed with this kind of agreement, but later on it withdrew. And therefore, this accord, 1987, Sri Lanka-India accord that got failed. Now what happened when Tamilians, LTTE blatantly rejected to be part of it, it continued to resort into war, and therefore India had no other option rather than align with the Sri Lankan government in, putting down this kind of Tamilian violence. So the purpose for which we went, this was kind of, a surprise for Indian part also, that this was not something they were meant to. They were not there to fight against the Tamilian minorities. Anyhow, we had a deep connection with the Tamilians, and this was going to have a serious repercussions in India's domestic politics as well. We knew this. But somehow India landed up into a situation when, along with the Sri Lankan government, we had to fight back these Tamilians. Okay, so Indian peacekeeping operation also, this accord failed, and Indian found themselves, Indian army, along with the Sri Lankan government military, and a proper kind of suppression of this LTT movement started. It was quite a bloody movement which happened, and it is being said that almost 1,200 Indian men, they died in the war, and Rajiv Gandhi also became one of the victims. Just write one point. Indian intervention in Sri Lankan civil war. Indian intervention in Sri Lankan civil war became inevitable. As it threatened India's unity, quote unquote, may write, India's unity, national interest, and territorial integrity. As it threatened India's unity, national interest, and territorial integrity. There was a two-pronged threat. Next point in analysis. Why India intervened? There was a two-pronged threat. So threat was from two sides. Number one, on one hand, external power could take advantage of the situation. On one hand, external power could take advantage of the situation to establish their base in Sri Lanka, thus posing an immediate threat to India. On the other hand, LTTE dream of a sovereign Tamil elam, that is sovereign Tamil state, sovereign Tamil elam, E-E-L-A-M, Tamil elam. Now this is very important. Comprising, separate Tamil elam comprising the all Tamil inhabited area. Comprising all the Tamil inhabited area, bracket mein write, of Sri Lanka and India. of Sri Lanka and India, bracket close, posed a threat to, India's territorial integrity. So, you know, two things were at stake. India's hegemony in IOR, and second, India's integrity. Right? These two things were at stake. Right? India's hegemony was at stake. India never wanted any other power to come up. And second, India's integrity was at stake because LTTE had a vision of creating a sovereign Tamil state which included all the Tamilian inhabitants of not only Sri Lankan northern and eastern part, but also the southern part of Indian state. You were asking, no, why India didn't blatantly later on went for something like Bangladesh. Initially, it never happened that this problem would even come towards Indian shore. But the moment the problem got involvement and the secret information came up that many of there are fissiparous tendencies within the Indian Tamilians as well at that time. At that time, that was a most prudent step to curb this ongoing movement in order to save our own integrity, right? So that is why the reason was completely different. Here, liberation would keep our integrity as stake. Their liberation continued to keep our hegemony intact. Therefore, there in Bangladesh, we went for liberation. Here, we came initially for some kind of agreement and later on ended at the side of Sri Lanka. Okay. Right, next. No, it was not it was a peace accord. So peace accord was basically for that country only. India just came for some kind of mediation or kind of creating this kind of agreement. And had it not been India's own interest, it would definitely would not have intervened. Later on, it was Norway who initiated the peace talk, if you remember, right? It was not India even. It was the peace talk were even held at international actors by Norway. Okay. Okay. Finally, what happened that this entire in 2009, LTT leader Prabhakaran was killed, and 26-year war, which estimated around $200 billion of destruction, it came into an end. Now coming up to the most important thing regarding the resolutions which are being passed by UNHRC. Okay, here I have just given you the points why India intervened at that time. These are not the points why India went for absentation in the recent resolution. That points would come up later on, right? So this is precisely just why India intervened at that time, these 2 points. Now, India's vote in UNHRC. This was the news in March 2021 when India abstained from voting on a resolution in UNHRC. This is the 8th resolution since 2019 in UNHRC, right? So what is the reason behind UNHRC resolution against Sri Lanka? First, we need to understand it. Why prima facie UNHRC had to go for some kind of resolution? So the background, of course, we have discussed. And you see, this is the area which was traditionally claimed as Tamil homeland. This was the entire northern province. This was the infamous Jaffna, right? And this was the entire Sinhalese dominated part. So this was the northern and the northeastern part, right? Which was being claimed by the Tamilians. Okay. So in 2010, actually, 1983, the war started. 2009, the war ended. Okay. Once the war got ended, the domestic and international human rights groups, including UNHRC, they started highlighting that there was immense war crime during this civil war, right? So, and what were the things which they pointed? It was forced disappearance, murder, torture, right? So prisoners of war were not being treated properly. So all these allegations came up from several quarters. Acha. In 2010, 18th amendment to the constitution of Sri Lanka was made. Now this 18th amendment is very important. One is 13th amendment regarding devolution of power, which has still not been made. Another was this 18th amendment. Now what was this 18th amendment? It provided dictatorial powers to the president of Sri Lanka. So in 2010, 18th amendment was made, which gave dictatorial power to the president of Sri Lanka. So the story begins actually from 2010. Dictatorial powers were being given to the president of Sri Lanka. He started taking huge power in his hand. In what ways, right? Re-elections any number of times. It was being said that president can get re-elected any number of times. So re-election at any number of times. Now, what is the problem with this? If every time you can get re-elected, there is no bar as far as the terms are concerned. Anyways, a person who is serving power for a long, there might be a tendency that he or she might turn dictatorial. Because that sword of insecurity would, of course, not be there. The accountability through citizens' mandate is absent. And the best part of democracy is that the term is definitely not going to be fixed, or even if it is fixed, then number of terms in which you can get re-elected, it has to be fixed. But this 18th amendment has shed off all these kinds of, obligations. So they said that president could be re-elected any number of times. Second important thing was that president can appoint and dismiss. Another important thing which came up in 18th amendment was that president can appoint or dismiss members of independent commission and judiciary. President can appoint or dismiss independent members of commission or judiciary. So suppose there is a human rights commission, president can come and dismiss you. And you see in India, therefore, this kind of protection is being made. Judiciary is independence of judiciary actually is the crux. You know, if you need to install rule of law in India, you need to make judiciary independent. Okay. And India and Indian constitution provides this opportunity of making judiciary independent. So but they have come up with this idea that we can remove any person in an independent commission and also judiciary. Haan ji. See, it's not that Indian constitution is considered to be one of the largest constitution, a beautiful collage. And believe me, in India, when we teach polity, it even appears to me so many times that what in a beautiful way our framers have constituted our constitution. Just look at one small clause also, they have this kind, like if they talk about Article 15, they have said subject to reasonable restriction, and here in this comes the concept of affirmative action. Therefore, we can't say that we can't go for this kind of preferential policy making. It is violating Article 15. No, it is not violating, right? You can go and have a person hanged because Article 21 say that you can take away the life of a person subject to the procedure established by law. So procedure established by law is there. So these kind of things might not be there in Sri Lankan constitution. They might have taken, you know, the loopholes out of it and might have come up with this thing. So you can't compare everything with Indian, because that's why Indian constitution is one of the largest constitution and took so much time, right? See, Pakistan also says it's democratic. Bangladesh also says it's democratic. Just saying democratic doesn't mean democratic. You have to show that thing also, right? And when the person in power who has come up is from a majority section, which is bound to make some kind of suppression to the minority, then of course that is very evident that they would come out with these kind of amendment, and such amendment would be passed also. Okay. So that was the reason this 18th amendment was being made. Cut to 2015, what happened? There were immense cases of human rights violations in Sri Lanka coming up, even after the war ended. So, you know, in order to curb the human rights violations in Sri Lanka, UNHRC adopted 31 resolutions. It is also called consensus resolution, right? Not that important. Abhi, the entire list I will tell you. I am just going through those important resolutions which are important for your answer writing. Okay. No, I believe in 2012 also it came up. I'll give you the entire list is there. So in 2015, in order to curb human rights violation, UNHRC adopted the 31 resolution, which is also called the consensus resolution. Now, what was the aim of this resolution? Number one, to establish reconciliation. Establish reconciliation. Number two, accountability. And number three, establish human rights in Sri Lanka. These were the three important aims of this resolution: to establish some amount of reconciliation, to establish some amount of accountability on the part of the government, and then to establish human rights in Sri Lanka. So when this resolution was passed, Sri Lankan government accepted this resolution, right? And certain steps were being taken. So the first step which was taken was establishing a credible judicial process. establishing a credible judicial process. What does this mean? Under this concept of credible judicial process, Sri Lankan government allowed under this establishment of credible judicial process, Sri Lankan government allowed participation of Commonwealth and other foreign judges. Participation of Commonwealth and other foreign judges. So they agreed to invite foreign judges also into their land and look up into human rights cases. Don't you think it was something which, to large extent eroded the sovereignty of this small island? No doubt it did. But anyhow, at that time, because of the international pressure and because of the grim situation of human rights, Sri Lanka has to accept it. Times you have to accept these things because anyways you want to increase your economy, and in a conflict-ridden society, no foreign markets or players want to come and invest. So of course you want to give a signal that we are on the road of improvement, and therefore they accepted this resolution, this consensus resolution. I am discussing this consensus resolution because this time when again the resolution was being passed, the present government, they came up and saying that the earlier resolution was an attempt to erode our sovereignty. We accepted it, but this time the situation is completely different. Right? And all these things they were saying at the behest of their very new trading partner, China. But they never knew that things will be taking a very bad and ugly turn. Anyways, so this was establishment of credible judicial process. Second was enactment of 19th Amendment. This amendment was meant to nullify the 18th Amendment. Remember 18th Amendment, which gave dictatorial powers to the president. Okay. So there was this enactment of 19th Amendment which nullified all the powers which was being given to the president under earlier 18th Amendment. So till now we have come across three major amendments in Sri Lanka. One is 13th regarding devolution. Another is 18th which gave dictatorial power to the president, and another is 19th which nullified those powers. Okay, so under international pressure these things happened. However, in 2020 the new government changed the entire progression. The Rajapaksa government, when it came into power, it withdrew its commitment under this 31 resolution. Therefore, I have mentioned this resolution. They withdrew their commitment under this 31 or consensus resolution. So they withdrew their commitment. They said we are not going to abide. The moment this government came into power, they withdrew their commitment which they had made before within consensus resolution or 31 resolution. So they said we are not going to abide by this resolution. And this point says that immediately when the new government came up power in 2020, this new government said that we are not going to commit towards this consensus resolution. This means we are not going to abide by what all was being said in this consensus resolution. Neither we would allow foreign judges to come up and take up trials for human rights, nor we would move forward towards nullifying the dictatorial powers of the president. So this progression started changing. Now, the reason why this present government said this was that according to them, according to the present government, this resolution was not in conformity with Constitution of Sri Lanka. It was never attacked internally by the politicians. Yeah, that 19th amendment was being made, but then they said we are going to withdraw. So now we can going to change this. Again, the amendment will come up and we are going to nullify this thing. The 19th amendment will go off. This the new government came up. See, these resolutions are not legally binding. Abhi, I will let you know this also. These have just a moral significance.
Amendment to the constitution, even though through a resolution is legally binding, no?
So they are saying we will again change it. If the government in the power wants to change the amendment, they can go forward and nullify the amendment which prior government have made. They said we are going to nullify it altogether. Okay. See, all these resolutions, as you said, as these are not legally binding. For that matter, even if it even talk about directive principles of state policy, DPSPs, they are not legally binding. But there are directives to the government to implement certain things. There are those principles or the yardsticks through which you can judge the efficiency of the government. So these resolutions are also the same. Imagine they are at international level. One morning you come up and say you are not abiding by this resolution, which has been backed up by so many countries together. So definitely the third actor or the third country will feel that there are some malicious intent behind this kind of thing. They might again enter into human rights violation. So many countries, FDIs, FIIs are being stuck. They are at stake. If somehow the civil unrest starts, what will happen to the economy? So many things keep going together. So these things, therefore, whenever they come up into news, they are going to be an international issue. For not only for the reason of human rights, but also for other reasons as well. Because as I said, the national economies are now no longer national. They have become international, right? So they have been connected. So anything which happens at one nation, it's going to have a ripple effect in many of the nations. Okay? Hanji. Some problem? Chalo. So in 2021, Hanji. How does they come up with these ideas? Why do they come up with power? Why do Khalida Zia came up into power? Huh? Why did so many dictators or this thing, they came up into power? That's all the... No, in that sense, in this extreme sense, we are not experiencing, no? So, see, India has risen to another level under this regime change. Since 2014, since the guards have changed, no doubt Indian position has changed, right? Whatever the criticism is, whatever the things is, for the first time we have started showing ourselves as a hard power. And what was the label which was being attached to a soft power post the, that attack, that thing reflected that India also have the capacity to strike back the surgical strikes, and from there the image, the global image has changed. So no doubt immense work has been, as far as the manufacturing, the Make in India, the Vocal India, there are many reasons to say that the regime change definitely had made Indian image different. Okay. And of course, limitations and criticisms are always there attached with every regime, right? So in 2021, what happened? Okay. So in 2021, a UN High Commissioner report highlighted human rights violation in Sri Lanka. Right? So a report came up in 2021. So UNHRC is after Sri Lanka. Every time it is ready with one report in its hand. In 2021 also a report came up. Now so they had an excuse saying that what all has been done in 2020, you are not abiding by our consensus resolution, we are going to pass another. Right? So this time they had a very valid reason. So a UN Human Rights High Commissioner's report came up and it highlighted that yes, there has been human rights violations in Sri Lanka. So its findings included increasing militarization in Sri Lanka. Increasing militarization in Sri Lanka. First thing which they find out was that there is huge amount of military presence in Sri Lanka. Second, they said that there was intensified surveillance against human rights defenders and NGOs. Right? They said there is heavy surveillance of government on human rights defenders and NGOs. Third thing they highlighted is that there is huge, massive government intervention as far as trials are concerned. There is massive interference in trials. So these are the three catchwords which you can learn as far as this UN report 2021 is concerned. Rising militarization, increasing surveillance, and heavy interference. With trials, that is, trials are not fair. They are not fair anymore. So during 46th session, this was the 46th session which adopted this resolution. During the 46th session of UNHRC, this resolution was adopted titled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka. What else was there in the report? Human rights situation in Sri Lanka is grim. Second, there is lack of accountability. So this report highlighted that human rights situation in Sri Lanka has deteriorated. It is very grim, especially under the current administration. Especially under the current administration. Second thing they said is that there is a lack of accountability as far as addressing the violations of human rights laws are concerned. There are lack of accountability as far as human rights violations are concerned. That is, if there is violation of human right, no one is held accountable for that. This UNHRC report finds. Third thing which they found was that judicial independence was deteriorating. Judicial interdependence was deteriorating. There was deterioration of judicial independence. judicial independence was on its way of deterioration. Why? The reason is enactment of 20th Amendment now. And what was this 20th Amendment? Your answer? It nullified the earlier 19th Amendment. So it nullified the earlier amendment, and again this 20th Amendment gave President the power over the appointment of judges. So you had 13th Amendment, then you have 18th Amendment, then you had 19th Amendment, then again 20th Amendment. 18th Amendment gave dictatorial power to President. 19th Amendment tried to curb it. 19th Amendment again was nullified by 20th Amendment. So back to square one. Clear? यहाँ तक? Lack of accountability is that if there is a violation of human rights, you have to make someone accountable for that. You have to have a clear judicial process through which the perpetrators of crime would be taken into account. But in Sri Lanka, this kind of thing was not being made. This is as per the UN report. And the reason is because perpetrator of crime is no one else than the government itself. And government have turned totally dictatorial post even 20th Amendment. Then there is no accountability left. So this is the overall situation which is happening as far as human right violations are concerned. Okay. So this resolution was put to vote, and 22 states out of 47 member council, they voted in favor. 22 states voted in favor. Who all voted? Names are not important, just listen and try to find out that these were the states who have voted. This means somehow these were the states who wanted to reprimand Sri Lanka on this regard. So these states were UK, very obvious to go in favor of such kind of resolution. France, Italy, Denmark, Netherlands, Austria, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, mostly the global north countries and countries who were subsidiaries, so-called subsidiaries of these global north. They voted in favor that yes, there is this problem, Sri Lanka is having this problem, we should go forward and intervene. This was something they came up with. 11 countries voted against. Now against mein jara like, because that is very important. So 11 countries voted against this resolution, and these were Bangladesh, China, including other, Bangladesh, China and Pakistan. They said that no. Why this kind? No, there's nothing of that kind existing in Sri Lanka. Everything is fine. Why China has it so much stake? Why would it like this to happen? If China is doing something, Pakistan of course will favor it. God knows who is the national security advisor of Pakistan. When Imran Khan went at that this problem to straight away to Russia, he got nothing. Ulta, huge amount of sanctions are imposed on him from US. So I am completely clueless who is the person brain behind this person. Anyways, so Pakistan has to go with it. And Bangladesh also, right? Because again, a tight diplomatic rope, as I told you, Bangladesh is enjoying as far as China is concerned, as far as India is concerned. Bangladesh might have its own economic stake and therefore it went against this. So these countries came in good books of Sri Lanka. After all, I will also let you know that what was the Sri Lankan response, right? The countries, there were 14 countries who abstained. And among them, notable were India and Japan. So India also abstained and Japan also abstained. Now, can you know the exact reason? Of course, India and Japan were thrown out of that Colombo Port deal. China was being taken. So they said, okay, fine, time will come, things will come in our hand, we will show you this thing. But at the same time, Sri Lanka, of course, is a very important partner of India. Anyhow, India knows that Sri Lanka would come for help to us, and therefore they can't blatantly go in favor of such kind of resolution. Neither they wanted to go against, so they just wanted to abstain and show a very strong signal, right? And Japan also did the same. So these was the equation which happened on this voting. India would not have voted for this. Reason because anyways, that also I'll let you know. India said that we are drifted with two considerations, and both the two considerations are not either or options. Both the considerations are very important. So there are considerations of Tamilians, and India said that you didn't go forward with 13th amendment. Forget 13th amendment, you have come up with another amendment, right? So there is a trust deficit as far as this thing is concerned. And another was, of course, India did had this feeling of territorial integrity going on. And India said that either of these things, I'll let you know in the next slide, either of these things, there is no either or option for us. Both the two conditions are important. And that was the reason India said that we are abstaining from it, right? So this was a formal response of Indian side. So first of all, just write this was the resolution 46 L1 2021. This was the resolution. Of course, if we are dealing with the resolution, at least you should know what the exact words and language of this resolution was. No need to remember it. Just understand few points in it. So first point of resolution was to strengthen the office of High Commissioner on Human Rights so that they can collect evidence regarding violations of human rights. So they said that we are going to have an office of High Commissioner on Human Rights in Sri Lanka, and this High Commissioner should be given the right to collect evidences. Right? So Office of Human Rights, High Commissioner on Human Rights, the Office of High Commissioner on Human Rights should be given should be strengthened, and they should be given the power to collect information as well as evidence against human right violation. Now, if a foreign power, a foreign actor, even if it is, a transnational organization with, of course, laden with some peripheral or superficial benign interest, even if such organization comes up at your home place and says that we are going to go for some kind of evidence collection, this means that they are interfering in your internal politics anyhow, right? So this resolution in itself, of course, to some extent was a way to kind of erode the sovereignty of small states. And this is not the first time this has happened. This has happened in history before also. All these things are, of course, an attempt to erode the sovereignty of small state systems. SSS we call them, small state systems. It can be said that if a High Commissioner office is coming up, he is making a formal inquiry, finding out evidences. This means that they are going to interfere in the day-to-day organization, in the administration, right? This could be argued. See, in exam, you should not go for a very determinant lines. Whenever you write answer, you should always use conjunctions like it could be argued, right? According to 1 quarter, it is often been said. These kind of things you should write. Because in arts, nothing is in white or black. Everything falls, and in fact, majority of the things falls in gray area. So you should always go for these ambiguous words like it is being argued from some quarter that it could be one attempt to erode or sabotage the sovereignty of small states, sovereign states, small sovereign states. Small sovereign states, SSS. This is something which we will even refer when international organizations like IMF, WTO, they will come into question, right? The very fact that, as I said yesterday, we will be dealing with Sri Lanka's state of emergency, that is going to be very interesting, because how the China debt policy is there and how they can go for IMF bailout and how they have till now rejected any such propositions of going forward for IMF bailout, and for a simple reason that these kind of bailouts by IMF, of course, are attached with some kind of conditionalities, as I said, as I discussed yesterday, and these conditionality do erode your sovereignty to a large extent, as what it happened with India. So LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization was introduced post 1991 only after the long list of conditionalities were being given to India in exchange of the foreign reserves which we were getting, foreign exchange which we were getting from IMF, right? So these things happen. This has happened before, they will continue happening. Okay. So second point of resolution was, it said that there is lack of accountability. And this lack of accountability is from all parties. This is very important. This resolution says that this lack of accountability as far as right abuses are concerned is from all the parties. All the parties includes the Sri Lankan government as well as LTTE. So they said this means that violations was not only being made by Sri Lankan government, it was also being made by this militant organization. So they say that there is lack of accountability for right abuses which have been committed throughout these years, right? And it has been by both the parties. It is not that only LTTE has to be blamed for that. Government of Sri Lanka is also equal partner in crime. Third, they said that we need to develop future accountability process. This resolution said that we will develop future accountability process, that how in future we can make the things more accountable. Okay? If things are made accountable, then crime or violent rate might decrease. If you are made accountable to someone, next time if you happen to get involved in some antisocial activity, you will think twice, because your accountability is being made. So they said in future we will develop a future accountability program, entire roadmap, so that next time if such kind of human right violation occurs, then the perpetrator will understand that some kind of consequences they are going to bear in future. So they said that we will develop a future accountability process. Next, they said that there is a lack of confidence on present government to address the shortcoming. This is very important. They had put a big question mark on the present government's efficiency to address human right violations in Sri Lanka. Lack of confidence on present government to address the shortcomings. Shortcomings regarding, of course, the human right violations. And last is to prosecute war criminals through an international evidence gathering and investigation mechanism. At international level, there would be an investigation. This means people from other countries, the foreign judges, the Commonwealth judges will come up and they will start deciding on the cases, and then prosecution will take place. Don't you think for a sovereign nation, the terms are a bit harsh? Of course. The last point is to prosecute war criminals through an international evidence gathering mechanism. They are not looking into the past thing. They are saying that since the war has started, human right violation has been made by all the parties. and all the parties included LTTE as well, and the then government and the subsequent governments as well, right? Haji. Last point. To prosecute war criminals through an international evidence gathering and investigation. Lack of confidence on present government to address the shortcomings. See, this 20th amendment when came up, this illustrated that the present government is not going to bow down with any kind of, democratic tendencies. They are not going to have such things. And therefore, they came up with this 20th amendment. So very fact that you are going to be more dictatorial, this means that power in the hands is going to be more corrupt. You're going to violate more human rights. And next, I was trying to say this only, that this report has said that there are early warning signals from Sri Lanka that immense human rights violation has already occurred. The trending image, abhi in the next we'll see. This was the thing, no? I want to put. Minimize. Achha. Okay. So we are going to have this thing, huh? Fine. Chalo. So this is the answer to your question, that what was the trajectory. So this is India's previous vote on resolution on Sri Lanka at UNHRC. So since 2009, the resolutions have been made. So India have voted in favor in 2009 and 12 and 13. It has abstained twice, I said. So this time it has abstained, and earlier in 2014 also India has abstained. So India has voted twice in favor of the resolution that has been critical of Sri Lanka in 2012 and in 2013, right? And it has also voted in favor of a resolution sponsored by Sri Lanka in 2009. So initially, the first resolution was sponsored by Sri Lanka only. So India at that time had favored that resolution. So this has been the trajectory. You can just write the years. In 2009, 12 and 13, India had voted in favor. Twice it has abstained from voting. And rest, the resolutions have been adopted without any kind of vote. The first resolution was sponsored by Sri Lanka. It was moved by Sri Lanka only, and therefore India, of course, voted in favor of it. Right? Now, what is the impact of UNHRC resolution? हाँ जी, अच्छा ठीक है. This was unanimously adopted. It was not even put to vote, this resolution, twice. You know, in year 2014, when India abstained from voting, at that time also the resolution was calling for an independent and credible investigation, and was asking Sri Lanka to make public all these kind of investigation. So this was one attempt in which India had, favored Sri Lanka's stand, right? So it was in 2014. And it was also a time when China has started making deep inroads in Sri Lanka. So, of course, at that time, again, India had tried in a way to reprimand Sri Lanka by abstaining from voting. And the same thing has repeated again in 2021. So, again, India has abstained from voting. कैसे होती है? उनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स जाते हैं, वही वोट कर लेते हैं. हाँ जी, हर केस में इंडिया. जहां फायदा वहां. See, the thing is that blatantly you can't go against a country who is strategically very important for you. Yet with international pressure, you can't be in favor for that country also. So better is to abstain in such circumstances. So you can't blatantly go in favor of Ukraine just because they are your traditional and very near dear partner. Because then, of course, at this time, the sympathy is more towards Ukraine. So you can't blatantly go in favor of them, nor you can go against them. Because as I say that, okay, in some previous lecture I've said. So the thing is that with USA, India, see, USA is not a very credible partner to rely upon always. Okay, history has shown that USA have never been a reliable partner for anyone. So relying on US is one of the biggest fault for Ukraine, and definitely India doesn't want to repeat that. Okay, so abstention therefore was a perfect choice in this case. So now first write what is the impact of this UNHRC resolution. What is the impact? See, first of all, this resolution is not legally binding. Right? The resolution is not legally binding. UNHRC resolution is not legally binding. However, it has a great moral significance. However, it has a great moral significance. It has a great moral significance. So it's not legally binding. It do have a great moral significance. So what is the impact? Number one, sanctions or withdrawal of benefits. So countries who have voted in favor, right? Countries who have voted in favor of resolution. Countries who have voted in favor of resolution may impose any sanction, or withdraw any benefits, to Sri Lanka. This could be one impact of this resolution. Countries who have voted in favor of the resolution, they may impose some sanction or they may withdraw some benefits which are given to Sri Lanka. For example, EU supported resolution might withdraw, right? For example, EU supported resolution might withdraw GSP, that is Generalized Scheme of preference. Scheme of preference. Generalized scheme of preference given to Sri Lanka. GSPs are actually bunch of preferential schemes which are generally being given by developed countries to the developing or the least developed countries. So they are umbrella schemes, or they are bunch of schemes which of course prefer or help the developing countries. So they are preferential schemes. You can write there are bulk of preferential schemes which are granted by industrialized nation to developing world. So EU has given bulk of preferential schemes to Sri Lanka. So the first impact could be that EU, who have voted in favor of the resolution, might withdraw GSP from Sri Lanka. When things are being given in terms of favor, then you can even withdraw them unilaterally. It is not based upon some contract. It is not an agreement. It is just some amount of concessions which developed countries give to developing. Anytime they can stop it. So this could be one thing. Second, justice in the future. Justice in future means that, likho, the resolution, yeah, right, post resolution, there could be new strategies. There could be new strategies to ensure accountability. There could be new strategies to ensure future accountability. Also, you know, UNHRC can also make recommendation to other international community also to come up and oversee that what kind of human right violations have been made and to what extent the government is accountable. So justice in future means in future, UNHRC and other international community might come and try to ensure that in future accountability is being made on the part of government. This could be another impact of this resolution. So justice in future. Third is, it hampers country's image in front of global community. Of course, such kind of resolutions hampers a country's credibility. It hampers, tarnishes a country's credibility at the global platform. The very fact that an international resolution is saying that the present government is not accountable, that too for human right violation, this speaks volume in terms that the entire image is being reduced, right? So of course, this is something very big, this kind of resolution. So this is definitely going to affect, to hamper, to tarnish Sri Lanka's credibility in front of the global audience. Next, it signifies a change in the posture or approach adopted by UNHRC. This resolution, right? This resolution has reflected that slowly UNHRC, this resolution has reflected that slowly UNHRC is taking a stronger stance, on the issue of human rights violation in Sri Lanka. This resolution has shown that UNHRC is gradually taking a stronger stance on the issue of human rights violation in Sri Lanka. A stronger stance. Last is time for a concrete action. Time for a concrete action, right? This resolution, the effect of the resolution can be seen in terms of referral of this issue, to International Criminal Court, ICC, or setting up an independent international criminal tribunal. So this resolution can be seen in terms of referral of this issue either to ICC or to some independent international criminal tribunal. Now, setting up of tribunal, an independent international criminal tribunal. This means there could be two ways further this resolution. Either you can take this issue in ICC, or you can take this issue to an independent investigation commission, an independent international criminal tribunal. आगे लिखो. The setting up of an independent international criminal tribunal, the setting up of an independent international criminal tribunal is more practicable, as Sri Lanka is not party to Rome Statute. As Sri Lanka is not party to Rome Statute, STATUE. So Sri Lanka is not party to the Rome Statute, under which ICC the cases can be taken up further. So if you take this issue to ICC, this is going to be a complicated thing. So international laws might be abridged. So better is to take this issue under a separate independent criminal authority which can see into these kind of violation issues. So these could be the probable impact of this resolution. So this resolution is supposedly the most strongest stance which till now UNHRC has put forward as far as this issue is concerned. आगे लिखें analysis में. Now analysis. This is regarding ICC, whether things would be taken up or forward or not. This comes under Rome Statute of ICC. So since Sri Lanka is not party to it, therefore we can't take it, or we cannot put this issue in ICC. Right? Analysis. This resolution will not have an immediate effect. It would not have an immediate effect
right now, the most probable action would be, right now, the most probable action would be to create an office, that would investigate, collect, and preserve evidence of war crime. Evidence of war crime. Second very important thing which came up is that this resolution does not target only the Sri Lankan state, rather some members of Sri Lankan military, and LTTE are also taken into account. Next point in analysis would be, was it a diplomatic fiasco? Was this resolution a diplomatic fiasco or failure on the part of Sri Lanka? Was this resolution a diplomatic fiasco or failure on the part of Sri Lanka? You will say yes. Fiasco, F-I-A-S-C-O, fiasco or diplomatic failure. You will say yes, because some of the Sri Lanka's staunchest allies, strongest allies, yes, this was a diplomatic failure. Why? Because some of the Sri Lanka's strongest allies, such as India and Japan, likho, because some of Sri Lanka's strongest allies, India and Japan, did not oppose the resolution. In fact, India used the occasion to recreate its concern, reiterate its concern regarding the interest of Tamilian minorities. One more point. Also, Sri Lanka in recent past has spoken in favor of, imagine, North Korea. In past, have spoken in favor of North Korea and Eritrea. Eritrea, E-R-I-T-R-E-A, Eritrea, at UNHRC. Making it impossible making it impossible for Japan, South Korea, and making it impossible for Japan, South Korea, and other African countries to support Colombo's stand. Right? So yes, if question comes up, yes, this was a diplomatic fiasco. Reason because it is very evident that many of the traditional allies like India and Japan has not, come in favor of Sri Lanka. Also, when Sri Lanka, see, if such kind of things are coming up in future, you should be well aware how to garner the support. But what Sri Lanka did in recent past was it started supporting North Korea and Eritrea. So when North Korea and Eritrea regarding different issues, and now this North Korea, they have this kind of, North Korea is something which is not in good terms, of course, with South Korea and of course with Japan. With Japan, they were going to have some kind of problems in relation. So of course, for any kind of support as far as North Korea is concerned, Sri Lanka came up for this. This might be some kind of economic concession they were thinking, or some kind of good books they might come as far as other powers are concerned, whatever the equation was. Eritrea also, it is a conflict-ridden country in Africa, and Sri Lanka came up for that. Now, when you are coming up in support of these countries, of course, North Korea doesn't have good relations with South Korea. It doesn't have good relations with Japan. So Japan and South Korea will keep this into mind. And so did all the other African countries. So of course, this thing was a diplomatic failure because many of the things were very much obvious that this is going to happen in future. Right? So this was, of course, a very, the diplomacy went to a very lowest ebb as far as Sri Lanka is concerned regarding this, especially keeping into mind the Indian stand. Okay. See, there could be some kind of power equations going on. Anyways, North Korea is one body. See, at that area, Japan, of course, wants to maintain its hegemony. And similar is the case with China also, right? Now, South Korea and Japan, and as I said, with Japan, Sri Lanka is going to have some kind of problem in relation, keeping into mind the China's factor. So it might be the possibility that it was China's, and Eritrea and all these areas are also, which are very important as far as China's policy of Belt and Road Initiative is concerned. Because till the Horn of Africa, this Belt and Road Initiative plan is there, right? Straight from Asia till that part. So of course, China's huge infrastructural stakes are there in many of the African countries, including this country as well. So this might be the reason when, for getting into good books of this great power of Asian giant China, Sri Lanka might have done this thing. Okay, but never thought that in future these things will come back, and with this kind of opposition from different parts. Okay. Now, what was India's stand and what was the reason why India did this? So what was India's stand as far as human rights violations is concerned? So in 2012, India has voted in favor. And in 2012, the resolution in which India voted in favor was establishment of a credible investigation for human rights violation. So in 2012, when India voted, it voted because, yes, India said that a credible investigation has to be made. Right? In 2021, however, India abstained. So what was India's stand? Number one, India has always expressed that it has never supported human rights violations in Sri Lanka. Number one, India has never supported human rights violations in Sri Lanka. Second, India always wants the solution of this issue to be internal. India always wants the solution of this issue to be internal. And not forced, as what happened in 31 consensus resolution. Remember 31 consensus resolution? That is the reason I mentioned that before. So this 31 consensus resolution, which later on after 2020, when the new government came up, they said we are not going to abide by it. India also said that this kind of interference, we definitely don't argue for. See, what all India will say about other countries holds true for itself. If India is saying that J&K is an internal issue, we don't want external interference, why would it say the same as far as Sri Lanka is concerned? Right? So it will say the same thing, that even this problem is of internal in nature, and therefore any kind of external interference amounts to erosion of your sovereignty. Therefore, when that resolution, consensus resolution came up, India said that no, that resolution is not fine. So India was with Sri Lanka at that time. Okay. So the position has changed now, but India has always made a stand that the issue has to be solved internally. Next. India has always emphasized meaningful decentralization. Meaningful decentralization means meeting the aspirations of Tamilians. Meeting aspirations of Tamilians. Aspirations of Tamilians. Third, India stresses devolution rather than accountability. India stresses devolution rather than accountability. And you see, it is in this regard, first of all, write this, India stresses devolution rather than accountability. No, next point. India stresses meaningful decentralization. Decentralization means you give up some amount of powers to the Tamilian population as well. Next is that India stresses devolution more than accountability, right? In this regard, in the same point, right? In this regard, India's viewpoint is different from the rest of international community. In this regard, devolution wale point mein you will write, in this regard, India's concern is completely different from rest of the international community. Is very much different from rest of the international community. So the international community is stressing more about accountability. It is talking more about accountability rather than devolution. But you know, as far as India is concerned, at the heart, there lies the goodwill of the Tamilian population. And of course, our concern is also there. So therefore, India's stance is more towards devolution rather than accountability. Accountability is more important for other international forces or actors. For us, devolution is more important, right? Next. Increasing Chinese footprint. With Rajpaksa brothers coming to power. With Rajpaksa brothers coming to power. Rajpaksa brothers coming to power. The entire family is in politics. Huh? India has been wary you're worried, you're cautious. India has been very cautious. That Colombo might lean more towards China. Might lean more towards China. Sri Lanka unilaterally decided to develop the Colombo ports. Sri Lanka unilaterally decided to develop the Colombo Port East Container Terminal Colombo Port's East Container Terminal through a Chinese-owned state firm, despite having a trilateral pact with India and Japan. Of course, in return, Adani Group was being awarded the west container part of the Colombo port, but anyway, this big deal was being cancelled. So in this regard, New Delhi's posture could be seen as a reprimand for Sri Lanka. REPRIMAND, reprimand for Sri Lanka. Last point. India supports implementation of 13th Amendment. India supports implementation of 13th Amendment of 1987. And have been alarmed when present government called for not going along this amendment. So in the analysis, if the question comes up that what was India's stand, so these were the India's concern because of which it abstained this time. Last point, right? India's approach was guided by two fundamental considerations. India's approach was guided by two fundamental considerations. What are these two considerations? Number one, support to the Tamils of Sri Lanka. Support to the Tamils of Sri Lanka for equality, justice, dignity, and peace. And second, to ensure unity, stability, and territorial integrity of Sri Lanka. To ensure unity, stability, and territorial integrity of Sri Lanka. Both the two goals are mutually supportive. Both the two goals are mutually supportive and not an either or options. Both the two goals are mutually supportive and not either or choices. Yeah, options. They are not either or options. Both are supportive. India supports Tamilians of Sri Lanka. Therefore, India accounts more for devolution rather than accountability. And it is at this point when India's viewpoint differs from the entire international community. The reason why India talks more about devolution is its own national integrity might come into no problem if Tamilians from there again start rising up and start putting up this voice of separate Tamil state. Okay, so India definitely wants the Tamils to get their share in their own country. हाँ जी. Separatism regarding, तो separatism तो है ही वहां. The movement is about Tamil separatism only in Sri Lanka. See, devolution means that in a legal constitutional way, some amount of powers must be given. I told you there was a Provincial Council Act also, in which it was being said that particular provinces must be made, and those provinces, if they wish, could even be given some amount of autonomy to look forward to their own problems, right? So like what in India we have the Panchayati Raj, the three-tier system. At the lowest level also you have the Gram Sabha, right, where people can come up and put forward their views. So from third tier, there are the three-tier system in India. This is called democratic decentralization. This is what devolution of power is, that how you can decentralize the power, give it in the hands of few people. So we have the PISA Act also, right? So we have some amount of autonomy given even to certain tribal and scheduled areas as well. This is what devolution of power is. Okay, that the interest, those people who are staying knows their interest better. So let them look into the administration of their own, right? This is something, this model actually India wants to import in Sri Lanka also, that this amount of devolution, some amount of power distribution must be given to Tamilians as well, right? And this is for its own interest, of course. And second, of course, a very stable, unified Sri Lanka would be good for India's also, India's interest as well. And then it is not an either or option. This has to be both. Okay. Last point is also very interesting. Given the elections in Tamil Nadu, this was the 16th Tamil Nadu legislative elections which were held on 6th April 2021, right? Where plight of Sri Lankan Tamil is a very easy fodder. You can have a very nice, good deliberation on Tamilian issue whenever this kind of things come up. So Tamil issue is a very easy fodder during election. And this legislative election was very much near, right? So at this time, the domestic politics also played its role, and therefore India's own strategic consideration plus the domestic politics consideration, India's decision from abstaining appears to be a very prudent and a rational choice. Okay, so very clearly India had put out its voice as well. It has given very stunning warning signals to China, to Sri Lanka as well. At the same time, it has put forward its demand of devolution as well. It has tried to appease the domestic audience in Tamil Nadu as well. At the same time, it has not gone blatantly against Sri Lanka, right? So it has tried to capture that space as well. So abstention appears to be the most rational and prudent decision of India. So in this way, you can always end up your answer saying that both domestic consideration as well as international geostrategic consideration played a role for India in taking this decision. Clear? Both domestic as well as geostrategic consideration played their role as far as India's decision of absentation is concerned. The domestic politics was the Tamil Nadu election, which was at that time going to take place. And geostrategic consideration is, of course, that we definitely want the Tamilians to be well settled there so that they might not in future harm the territorial integrity of India. We don't want another refugee problem to come up. So we don't want, geostrategically, I said Sri Lanka is placed in the busiest sea line of communication from Strait of Malacca to Persian Gulf. Of course, we doesn't want a disturbed thing there. We want stability in Sri Lanka also because I said there is a shifting of naval fleets also. So the entire area has to be extremely friendly as far as India is also concerned. That too safe also. Piracy wale may be the entire area holds very importance. All these things we'll deal up when we'll be dealing in elaboration one at least lecture on IOR if we can have it. So that thing you will understand that why Sri Lanka is so integral to India. Okay. Next is that that depends upon the situation which we are talking about. That even depend upon, at far as trade is concerned, you are on what stand. If you are a supplier of something like arms and defense, a conflictual neighbor is always good. But not that. Actually, USA never had this kind of conflict. If you look into the wars which have been sponsored directly, indirectly by US, you have seen that US have never fought a war on its area as well as in its vicinity. It has always fought a war miles, kilometer apart. So USA is very intelligent in it, in that regard also, right? So it definitely wants a conflict-ridden country, a conflict-ridden area, but far flung from its own space, so that its economy, its people remain safe. Okay, so this is a very nice tactic of US. Okay, this is but who listens? That is the plight of small sovereign states, that no one listens to them. Actually, so they don't have even the bargaining space to even bargain. With whom will they bargain? The balance of trade is never in their favor. It's always in the favor of other main actor with whom they will bargain. So they are never in the negotiating tables actually. They are only at the receiving end. So what was Sri Lanka's response? So Sri Lanka blatantly said that it is politically motivated. Sri Lanka said the resolution was completely politically motivated. It of course rejected any attempt by UN to come and collect evidences. It rejected the UN move to collect and preserve evidences of war crime, because of course that would involve huge amount of interference in government administration. I told you that is one step towards erosion of their sovereignty. They said we are opposing it. They thanked all those who supported them. They even thanked all those who abstained. No choice left to them. They have to thank India. Ki at least against to nahi aaye. At least they didn't came in against us. So they thanked all their supporters. They even thanked those who abstained. And then they said, last point, and then they said that India must have decided to abstain after careful consideration. So Sri Lanka is also accepting that India might have come up with this decision of abstaining after careful consideration of various factors. So the very fact that Sri Lanka itself acknowledges that India's step was after careful consideration of numerous factors holds true, holds the testimony to the fact that India's move was completely prudent and rational. Right? In the conclusion, what you can say? Of course, this kind of resolution provided moral sanctions on Sri Lanka. So every government in the next election, whatever government or whatever thing comes up, the government is going to get scrutiny to what extent they have done as far as human rights violations is concerned. So of course, this resolution will have a moral significance. If not a tacit or very clear sanctions, but a moral sanctions would of course be there on Sri Lanka. Second, of course, it is an internal and subjective matter. This would provide moral sanctions on Sri Lanka means if such kind of resolution has come up, this means that they do, and UNHRC has said that we have n number of evidences. So if an international organization ready to show the evidences is saying that we have so many evidences of war crime, of human rights violation, this means that the future or the present government now have a moral obligation not to repeat the same. So anything, more than anything, they give a moral sanctions on Sri Lanka. Another is that this resolution, its acceptance or its not acceptance is completely an internal and subjective matter as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. This is going to be their internal matter because of course it's not legally binding anyways. Implementation lies completely with the president of Sri Lanka. And at the crossroads, at the present situation, international pressure will of course play a very important role. So Sri Lanka has to be very serious as far as human rights violations are concerned because international eyes are on it only. So international pressure is going to be there. Okay. International pressure becomes important. जापान क्या कर सकता है? See, Japan also wants its own position because China is increasing its inroad in Sri Lanka. So, they even want to have good relation with Sri Lanka also, no? Why would they try to make Sri Lanka angry when they are seeing that Sri Lanka is very much in Gulf of China? Now, this portion is going to be very important because this is one of the most important issues, even more important than the human right thing, because this is the most recent thing which came up. So first of all, just listen carefully. What was the situation which happened? So August 2021, government of Sri Lanka declared an economic emergency. This economic emergency was completely different from the financial emergency which there in India. Of course, that is never being made in India so far, thankfully, but that is completely different from that. So President of Sri Lanka even called up army to manage this crisis. This was so out of control. Now, according to World Bank estimate, 5 lakhs of people have fallen below poverty line. 5 lakh is not a small number for a country like Sri Lanka. 5 lakh people have gone below poverty line. And since this emergency, this financial crisis have hit every sphere of human existence, therefore it will be a weak or myopic idea to call it just a financial crisis. It is definitely a big humanitarian crisis as well. So now, why Sri Lanka entered into this kind of crisis? Number one, rising food prices. So food inflation was very high. Rising food prices. Depreciating currency. The value of Sri Lankan currency was depreciating. Depreciating Sri Lankan currency. This was not enough, that even their forex got depleted, depleting forex reserve. Depleting forex, foreign exchange reserves. This foreign exchange they wanted for importing essential commodity. So when your currency, the value is very low vis-a-vis dollar, your forex are very low, you don't have much foreign reserve to buy things. This means that there would be scarcity as far as supply is concerned. Therein again China, the entire cycle comes up. So again the food prices rises, right? So food prices rises, inflation comes up, again the currency devalues, again this thing happen. So this cycle keeps on going. So President Gotabaya, what he did was he called up army to manage the crisis. How? He said that now there is a need for rationing of essential goods. So army was basically called for rationing purpose. For rationing of essential commodities. Right? So that this amount, a fixed amount of commodity would be given to everyone. Acha, just remember this thing. Abhi in the later half also we'll let you know this thing. That like we have the PDS system, there is no such system there operational in Sri Lanka. That is another very important problem. Right? So therefore, army was given the task that you have to delegate, they were being delegated this task that you have to give essential commodities, ensure that everyone is getting it or not. Okay. Now what happened? What led to economic crisis in Sri Lanka? This is a bigger question we need to understand. What led to economic crisis in Sri Lanka? So it was primarily two C's. Two C's. One is COVID crisis, another is China's debt policy, debt trap policy. So primarily it was two C's, both related to China also, right? COVID also, allegedly, epicenter was China, and debt diplomacy is also from China. So now what was the impact of COVID crisis? Let's look into this. See, Sri Lanka is a very beautiful country. 10% of its GDP is based upon tourism. Tourism was the first sector which was very harsh hit by COVID. Reason is mandated social distancing and lockdown. So tourism sector was very much affected. Number one. Apart from tourism, export sector also got very much affected. So this was the tourism sector, export sector, disruption of MSME operation, small and medium enterprises, they also got disrupted. See, COVID has impacted small industries a lot. Big industries came out with their own contingency plans, but not the small industries can't come up. So MSME sector was also very much hard hit. This means that there was income loss as far as daily wage earners were concerned. These are the people who actually get affected whenever some kind of things happen. So daily wage earners were very much affected. So these were certain reasons why during COVID crisis, there was huge amount of economic contraction. Right, another point ahead of it. Weak performance, apart from these sectors, what all sectors got affected? Weak performance of construction, garment, tea, and mining sector. Tea and mining sector. Next point. Closure of international airport. Closure of international airport. Of course, closure of international airport have stopped tourism. So tourism industry got affected. So all these created a steep rise in the poverty level. So poverty level increased. It was being said that an additional 500,000 of people, became new poor. 500,000 of people became new poor. They were not poor before, they became new poor due to pandemic. Another very important thing what happened and which affected Sri Lankan economy was women employment got adversely affected. Women employment got adversely affected. Why women employment got adversely affected is because of mental health issues and exhaustion. So they got so much exhausted. Reason because now they have to balance the work related tasks along with the household chores, right? So because of this, it was being said that the women at that time, and that hold true for any country actually. So this exhaustion as well as the mental health issues were very much there. There was homeschooling of children also started. So the women responsibility increased manifold. Women started losing jobs because whenever there is a kind of choice that, see, there were job cuts, of course. And when in the particular job, you just have restricted seats, of course, priority is given more towards male than to female, keeping into mind that female have many other tasks also to do. They might not give their 100% towards the job. So, of course, this all led to a kind of dip in the women employment level. Next, right? Worsening of external debt dynamics. Worsening of, last point in COVID and its impact, worsening of external debt dynamics. So when the external debt dynamics, they got worsened. External debt dynamics means that there was, of course, a balance of payment crisis in Sri Lanka. Because their forex exchange were depleting, their currency was depreciating, the value was not that enough to buy products, right? Therefore, they were having this balance of payment crisis. Now, what is the first impact of this? BOP crisis impact not only is for domestic audience, but also at international level. So at international level, the rating of Sri Lanka was being downgraded, right? This led international credit rating agencies, this led international credit rating agencies downgrading Sri Lanka's rating. Downgrading Sri Lanka's rating. Now, when Standard and Poor or Moody's, they downgrade your rating, this means that foreign investment would not be attracted towards you. So, of course, this is going to hamper you as far as FDIs or FIIs are concerned, or placement of MNCs or TNCs are concerned. Right? So, these were certain impact of COVID as far as Sri Lanka was concerned. And all these added to the state of financial emergency. So, this was the first C factor, COVID factor. The second C factor is more dangerous, that is China's debt trap policy. China's debt trap policy. So now what is China's debt trap policy? See, this is also called debt book diplomacy or checkbook diplomacy. Next point is that China's BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative led debt trap diplomacy, is an economic aspect of China's salami slicing strategy. China's salami slicing strategy. Okay. So now what is China's salami slicing strategy? That also we'll just go through in a very quick way. You know, in the map, this is very interesting. How China has tried to encircle India not only through this way, but also through Belt and Road Initiative from this way. So here China is into these are certain strategic locations of Chinese presence. So you can find it, Pakistan Gwadar Port, $16 million China has invested. Sri Lanka, Hambantota Port, that is a history, 8 billion is being invested. Then comes up Philippines, this is a Bicol railway which they are supposed to make up, right? In Palau, they are also there. Malaysia, they are there. Cambodia, they are there. Kenya also, Musama Nairobi railway they are going to make. In Djibouti, they are going to make certain ports, airports and railways. So this is the way in which, you know, in Laos also they are trying to make. So this is the way in which they are trying to stretch themselves through the ambitious BRI project. The BRI project and its related debt trap diplomacy is very important aspect of China's salami slicing strategy. But before we come to it, just write few things. America's statesman John Adams said, American statesman John Adams once said, there are two ways to conquer. American statesman John Adams famously said, there are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One by sword and other by debt. One by sword and other by debt. Other by debt. D-E-D-T. B-T. China choosing the second part, that is through debt, has emerged as the world's biggest, China choosing the second path has emerged as the world's biggest official creditor. It has emerged as the world's biggest official creditor. Which are the world's crediting agencies? So we have IMF, we have World Bank primarily. IMF gives short-term loans in times of BOP crisis. And World Bank give long-term loans or grants. These are generally development in nature, but surpassing them, China has officially become #1 international creditor agency, right? All thanks to its debt diplomacy. Now, right ahead, debt trap diplomacy is the term coined by Brahmachelani. Chellany, Brahmachelani. So the term has been coined by Indian scholar Brahmachelani. It describes a creditor country. It describes a creditor country extending debt. It describes a creditor country extending debts solely to increase its political strategic leverage. Solely to increase its political strategic leverage. Another term for this could be predatory lending practices. Predatory lending practices. Actually, this term is very often being used to the loan and conditionality system which IMF goes with. But with China also, under this debt trap policy, this word or these terminologies are being used. So it could even be called as predatory lending practices. According to Brahmachelani, it is clearly part of China's geostrategic vision. Brahmachelani, it is clearly part of China's geostrategic vision. Now, what is Chinese salami slicing policy refers to? To write just one line. China's salami slicing strategy is a strategy by which Chinese government uses small provocation none of which constitutes casus belli, CASUSBELLI, none of which constitutes casus belli. What is casus belli? It is an act to justify a war. Casus belli means an act which can justify war. Right? Which can justify war, bracket mein, which none of which constitutes a casus belli by itself, bracket close, none of which justifies the war, bracket close. That is, casus belli is an act which does not justify war, bracket close. So none of which constitutes a casus belli by itself. Casus belli by itself, right? This is what China did in Doklam. बता रही हूँ. This is what China did in Doklam recently. So what is this salami slicing strategy? This means slowly and slowly. How do you slice things? You slice it slowly, slowly. This is the strategy of China. They just go for very small provocations, just small acts, which does not constitute casus belli. That does not constitute any such act, does not involve provocation of war or a very hot one-to-one interaction or a defense, nothing of that kind. So they just go for small provocations. Like they will just try and occupy a few miles into your land, then just come for a ceasefire, a small kind of skirmish will happen, and then that would be okay. But slowly and steadily, you will find Chinese intrusion into your land, and that you will even not know that it has happened. This is called Chinese salami slicing policy. Slowly and slowly, they go for small provocation, which itself does not justify any kind of war. So they are not into any kind of war, but still they are doing something and they are progressing into others, either economic sovereignty or political sovereignty. So this is the salami slicing strategy of China, and it has various variants. The economic variant of this policy is debt diplomacy, where the country doesn't know that they are getting into this kind of trap. So initially, what this debt diplomacy says, this problem is that China never evaluate the credibility of the country to which it is giving its debt. For a very special reason, because it doesn't want to evaluate the credibility. And it is better if a country which is failing comes within its trap. So what China will initially do is it will give some amount of good concessions regarding, like, we'll build a boat or we will build an infrastructure, we will go forward with the roads, labor will be ours, technicians will be ours, you just don't have to do anything, just your land is there, we just need your permission. These are certain small things which they will offer to. And the falling state will definitely go for it. And then what happened in Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, when they had a very nice deal happening, and then when this port, the financial, the commercial viability, that is the amount of expenses was not getting, then China said that this is not done. We expect something out of it. We have made this port. So Sri Lanka is saying, what can I do? They said, okay, fine, and doesn't matter, just give 99 years seal to us. And this is leased to us. This is not something they have done in Sri Lanka. They have done in many other countries as well, right? So this is the economic variant of this salami slicing strategy. Okay. Something? No, Abhi, chalo. 5 minutes break, chalo. Just 5 minutes, because anyhow I needed to complete this thing and I was about to start Myanmar. See, things we are getting bit slow, right? There is a particular timeline, we have to go for that. Hai na? how China, through salami slicing strategy, through BRI diplomacy, have tried to extend itself, right? So in Hambantota in Sri Lanka, Gwadar in Pakistan, because of Gwadar, therefore we have to develop the Chabahar port in Iran. That we'll deal when we'll be discussing the Look West policy, right? So they have made this thing inroads in Djibouti as well, in Myanmar also, right? Djibouti is China's first overseas military base is been there. Pakistan, they are constructing the Gwadar port, right? So it is in this way they are trying to encircle India. This is called the string of pearl diplomacy. Just an analysis part I'm trying to tell you. String of pearl diplomacy. String of pearl diplomacy of China. This is another component of the salami slicing strategy of China, right? That you encircle India from all the sides. In response to this, from Indian side, as far as the think tanks are concerned, so there is an interpretation of think tanks which talks about India's Iron Curtain policy. India's Iron Curtain policy. So India's policy to counter string of pearl diplomacy as per the think tanks could be the Iron Curtain policy or Iron Curtain strategy. So when China tried to establish its inroads, its base, thank you, Bhaiya, chale gaye wo, its base in Djibouti, what India did was it tried to encircle Djibouti from other side, and India also tried to make their presence in Seychelles and Maldives. So you make your presence in Djibouti, we'll make our presence in Seychelles and Maldives. This means we are trying to create an iron curtain, right? So you are encircling us, we are encircling you from this side. So this is Indian diplomacy to counter Chinese string of pearl diplomacy. This is the terms which are generally being used, not in forefront with any, government press release. So it is basically a think tank idea that India is undergoing the strategy of Iron Curtain. As far as the official policy to oppose string of pearl diplomacy is concerned, we have the Project Mawsum. Project Mawsum. What is this Project Mawsum? Project Mawsum is an official policy, we can say, to counter string of pearl diplomacy. It is an initiative of Ministry of Culture, right? It is to be implemented by ASI. It is by Ministry of Culture. Project Mawsum, I'll tell you. So, initiated, or it is being taken forward by Ministry of Culture. It would be implemented by ASI. Now, Project Mawsum actually involves all those countries which are under the monsoons, under the geographical, space of monsoon winds. So, all the IOR region basically is under the monsoon, and therefore comes the word Project Monsoon. So, Project Monsoon is a kind of cultural collaboration we will make with all the countries in the IOR region. So this is cultural collaboration, right? It is a kind of cultural collaboration wherein there would be shared knowledge system. There will be sharing of technologies. There would be sharing of ideas. Between the countries in the IOR region, especially. So getting the point. So you have the salami slicing strategy. Within it, the economic angle is debt diplomacy. Another angle is the BRI project and the string of pearl diplomacy. And from Indian side, we have, according to think tank, an unofficial curtain Iron Curtain strategy, and an official project MOSM. This is the way we are also putting our strong stance, right? Acha, there is one word called cabbage tactics. Cabbage tactics. Cabbage tactics. This is also another word for salami, salami slicing strategy. Cabbage tactics. What is like if you see a cabbage, you find multiple layers. So layer by layer you have to remove. So similar is the cabbage tactics, in which a country, China, tries to encircle it with its maritime forces in different layers. This is the cabbage tactic. So forefront, it is not coming in a war. It is trying to encircle you. So it is trying to encircle India by getting in control with all the important ports, right? All the important ports you can see. So this is another term called cabbage strategy. Cabbage strategy. It is a military swarming, it is a military swarming practice. Swarming, S-W-A-R-M-I-N-G. A tactic to control by surrounding. A tactic to control a land by surrounding it. A tactic to control the land by surrounding it with successive layers of Chinese navy. With successive layers of Chinese navy. Therefore, through debt diplomacy, what China is doing is not the first, second, third, or fourth generation of warfare. It is the most advanced form of warfare. We can call it as fifth or sixth generation of warfare. Fifth or sixth generation of warfare. This is what China is doing, right? So at the behest of the salami slicing strategy and under it the debt diplomacy, China is undergoing the fifth or the sixth generation of warfare. What Britishers did was blatantly, outright. They were not at all fearful of any kind of public pressure or public opinion. What China is doing is under carpets, right? Because of the immense public pressure. Anyhow, you have to face it. Okay? Okay. Conventional warfare say ahead. So there might be certain levels, and there are levels and generations of warfare where you straight come, or you go for tacticals, or you go for guerrilla warfare. So these are certain generations will come up. The most recent generation of warfare is this, in which you don't get involved into any kind of hot war, rather just go for small kinds of provocation, just take some amount of territorial inch, move forward, doesn't amount to any kind of war as well, right? Or enter into these kind of diplomacy, take control of the strategic things of other nations, and then go forward controlling their sovereignty, not only politically but economically as well. Acha. So what are the other reasons of economic crisis in Sri Lanka? Apart from COVID and apart from China, Chinese debt diplomacy. Okay, in Chinese debt diplomacy, just write the example of Hambantota port, Sri Lankan transfer. In debt diplomacy, right? The most famous example is of Chinese debt diplomacy is Sri Lankan transfer of Hambantota port Sri Lankan transfer of Hambantota port to Beijing on 99 years lease. On 99 years lease. You know, in the same way, the Gwadar port is also being given to China on almost 4-decade lease. So Pakistan Gwadar port, it has also taken. Same thing has happened. 99 years. 99 years. Sri Lanka, इसी के आगे एक और पॉइंट लिखो. Sri Lanka owes more than $5 billion debt to China. Sri Lanka owes almost $5 billion debt to Sri Lanka, to China. Sri Lanka owes almost $5 billion debt to China. And last year it has additionally taken $1 billion. So 5 to thai, 1 billion also it has taken. China has become Sri Lanka's 4th largest lender in this regard. 4th largest lender in this regard. Has become Sri Lanka's 4th largest lender in this regard. Therefore, Chinese debt diplomacy is rightly being dubbed as road to ruin. It is dubbed as road to ruin. That is, it will ruin you completely. It is a road to ruin. Chinese debt diplomacy is considered, or it is dubbed as road to ruin. Okay, so this is the second reason. Third is dependence on import. So Sri Lanka heavily depends upon import, and therefore it underwent this thing. Next is underperforming tourism industry. So tourism is constituting the 10% of GDP, and tourism actually got inflicted because of two reasons. So in 2019, there was a very huge bomb blast, terror attack in Sri Lanka, because of which tourism was badly affected, and then was the COVID pandemic. So because of these two reasons, tourism sector was very much affected. Now, when tourism sector was affected, it led to loss of jobs. Just in the bullet points, right? This lead to loss of job. Tourism is a service sector. It involves huge amount of people. It led to the loss of job. And not only loss of job, also loss of foreign revenue. Loss of foreign revenue. Loss of foreign revenue. Another reason was depreciation of currency. So, you know, when currency got depreciated, so the cycle goes like this. Why is this currency getting depreciated? See, because of the COVID thing, the export had decreased. Okay. So export had decreased. Workers' remittance has also reduced. Workers' remittance. Remittance are those payments which are being made to the home state by people who are residing abroad. So due to COVID crisis, what happened? Many of the workers came back to their own place. So this worker remittance also got reduced. Okay. So because of these two reasons, export decreased and worker remittance came down, the amount of money which the Sri Lankan currency had in comparison to dollar, that also decreased. So value of Sri Lankan currency depreciated by almost 8%. 8% is a huge figure. So 8% the currency got depreciated. Now, when currency got depreciated, what the government did, the value of your currency is very less. So what they did was they started printing currency. So Sri Lankan government went into printing of currency. So when they started printing currency, then what happened? Yeah, the demand, the liquidity increased in the market. So when liquidity increased in the market, this means the purchasing power increased. This means the demand increased. However, the supply was not increasing. So when the demand is increasing, but the supply is not increasing, this means price would rise. What is inflation? It is consistent rise in price over a long time. So this led to inflation. Now when inflation happened, that is rise in price, coupled with decrease or depreciation of your currency by almost 8%, this means import got expensive. Import got expensive. Now for essential commodity, as I said, Sri Lanka is very much dependent upon import. So when import got expensive, it started adding pressure to the foreign exchange reserves, right? And of course, there was massive food shortage. So the food shortage was one because of the rising inflation. Second and most, in fact, that is the first point which I am going to tell, is that recently Sri Lankan government went for organic only approach. Organic only approach. What does this mean? This means a decision to ban chemical fertilizers. Sri Lankan government came up with this great novel idea of organic only approach. See the audacity. So you are coming up with organic only approach. You are banning import of chemical fertilizers. This led to a drastic fall in the food output. Okay. All these things are long process. They take time. These are good steps, but they do take time. Implications it will have a long lasting implication, but immediate effect was that it led to the decrease in the food output. When the food output decreased, this means there was food scarcity. Right? So it was not only about COVID, it was not only about China, it was about these factors as well. Another is that FDI flows have halved. As compared to 2019 and 20, it has almost halved. No need to remember the figures. So in 2020, like, it was $670 million. In 2019, it was $1.2 billion. So it is almost half what it was in 2019. Okay. So the FDI's inflows also decreased. Another very important reason was high debt to GDP ratio, right? High debt to GDP ratio. High debt to GDP ratio. Okay, that slide I don't know. Anyways, write it here only. High debt to GDP ratio. Now, high debt to GDP ratio means that out of the total GDP, the amount which you have to give for debt is very large. Okay. So the figures, just listen, in 2020, it was 109.7%. 109.7% debt to GDP ratio was there in 2020. If we just go into some lesser heavy figures, we can say that debt on Sri Lanka was almost 80% of GDP. Debt on Sri Lanka was almost 80% of GDP. So in a year, what all they are producing, 80% has to go to debt. And apart from the debt, there would be interest repayment also. So imagine what all you are producing, you have to give everything. 80% of debt to GDP ratio. Okay. Now, if we talk about figures, total debt was $26 billion. Okay. And debt which Sri Lanka has to repay in year 2022 was $7.6 billion. This was the total debt. $26 billion was the total debt. The total debt which they have to repay this year, 2022, this was $7.6 billion. And imagine their forex was, their foreign exchange was $1.5 billion. How would they pay? Their foreign exchange, you have foreign exchange of just $1.5 billion. You have to make a payment of $7.6 billion this year. Okay, therefore, debt to GDP ratio almost was 80%, almost is. So this is the extent of crisis which Sri Lanka is suffering right now. Yes, why not? So what happened that Sri Lankan government thought that there might be certain problem with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka's monitoring. Like we have the RBI, they have the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. They even removed the director. That also didn't help. Then what they did was, they said by expenses are huge. So what happened that whenever, suppose you go out for studying and behind your family now the expenses is very less. So they call you back. That come on, no need to go out. The same thing happened. They called ambassadors from 3 nations that come back home, we don't have expenses to meet you. So 3 ambassadors from Cyprus, Germany and Nigeria were also called back. This was the level of their economic crisis. They can't even afford ambassadors. So they called upon 3 ambassadors of 3 countries, right? Cyprus, Germany and Nigeria. Now, when this was the level of the crisis, how did government responded? Cyprus, Germany, Nigeria. So how government of Sri Lanka responded to this crisis? They started first of all blaming the hoarders. They said this is all the problem of black marketing. Artificial scarcity is being created. To large extent that was correct also, but not wholly. So the first thing is that they started pinpointing or blaming the hoarders. They said people are resorting to black marketing. They are creating artificial crisis. This is increasing the prices of the food essentials and other essential commodity. Second thing what government did was they declared economic emergency. They declared economic emergency. They declared economic emergency under Public Security Ordinance. As I said, army was given the task, Public Security Ordinance. Army was given the task for rationing. So it was said that army will seize the food supplies from all the hoarders and then distribute it to the people. Ordinance. Emergency laws also enabled authorities to detain people without warrant. Now this is going to be dangerous thing. detain people without warrant. The emergency provisions included a provision which allowed government to detain people without warrant, seize their property. Under the emergency provisions, when it was being applied, so the provision included one clause which says that yes, government can detain people even without warrant. They can even seize their property. Without warrant means you're not supposed to, again, the lack of accountability, you're not supposed to show them the reason, right? Or the arrest orders, no need for the arrest orders. You can easily arrest them. Later on, I'll let you know in the analysis part that there is, of course, a danger of rising militarization under this emergency provision because of this provision of arbitrarily taking people into warrant, right? Government also gave power to the army to ensure that forex are used only to buy essential goods. So army was given this task to ensure that forex is used to buy only essential goods. Gave orders to army that forex would be used to purchase only and only essential goods. Many power saving mechanisms were also being taken. Power saving mechanisms like the power cuts, more than 7 hours power cuts daily. They also said that government offices will not run air conditions, right? So these were certain power saving mechanisms which were also being taken. The economic condition has, of course, raised a fact or a fear that Sri Lanka might default and therefore it has to go for IMF for some amount of bailout package. But so far, the Sri Lankan government have completely opposed this kind of things, right? Now, what is the criticism, right? The criticism of the move, and then we'll end. That government might, under this kind of forex depletion and balance of payment crisis, they might go to IMF for some amount of loan. IMF kya hai? IMF gives short-term loan. They don't give long-term loan. So immediate you are ending up into a economic crisis, IMF can give you loan. But they also know that IMF loan are attached with long amount of conditionality. So till now, they are not getting with this fact that we will go to IMF. You never know, in future they might go. The World Bank gives loan for long term, for development purposes. But this is the BOP crisis. So World Bank will not give loan. What could be the criticism of the move, right? Number one, danger of using government power, to stifle dissent, stifle or stop dissent. So government can use their power to stifle dissent. Second point, Sri Lanka does not have a universal public distribution system as we have in India. Sri Lanka doesn't have a universal public distribution system or a ration card system as we have in India. Therefore, there is a problem that even if essential commodities are being put at disposal, whether they will reach to the beneficiaries or not. So there will be some great problem as far as the middleman is concerned, as far as black marketing or hoarding threats are dangers are concerned, right? Because they doesn't have a universal distribution system as we have, public distribution system. Third, there is also a danger of increasing militarization. Danger of increasing militarization of state institution. So what has been, how has India helped in this regard, or what has been India? Later on, I'll just, probably yesterday, I'll just deal with one of the questions which might come. This is the question which might come, that the economic emergency in Sri Lanka is a challenge as well as an opportunity to improve bilateral relations with island nation. Comment. Right? So how it could be an opportunity for India and how it can be a challenge for India. So opportunity, of course, we can see how has India helped. Just write few points. No, how has India helped in this crisis? Right? Line of credit. $900 million India has promised to give. Question again, we'll repeat tomorrow. Abhi to anyways, we don't have time. $900 million line of credit India has given in January 2022. $1 million loan has been given, or line of credit has been given to Sri Lanka. This is basically in order to help them rejuvenate their depleting forex reserves. Dollar. Line of credit. Apart from that, $500 million we have even promised. Remember in the initial discussion I told you, when the foreign secretary has come up, this is basically in order to purchase fuel. So this is precisely for fuel purchase. So an additional $500 million apart from that, you know, there is a 4-pillar initiative. Yes, 4-pillar initiatives. Four-pillar initiative between India and Sri Lanka in terms of some amount of bail packages that we will discuss tomorrow. So what are the 4 ways in which India is helping the fragile economy of Sri Lanka? Then we will deal quickly with this question. We will also deal one aspect of how Russian-Ukraine crisis is affecting the Sri Lankan economy in how ways. And then, you know, that will be the end of actually Indo-Sri Lankan relations. Because after that, what all is there? What all after is there? It's just, you know, not very much for your exam purposes, in the way that you just have to have an idea that what would be the commercial relation. So we'll just go through it very quickly. Okay, so just the point you have to go for it, because the issues are just the 2 issues which are important. In the end, we will deal up with challenges. So challenging part will be important when we'll be dealing with the fishermen issues, right? And then the last would be what could be the way forward. So that few analysis and important points I'll make you. And we'll start with Indo-Myanmar tomorrow.